Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Tabs on Tap. I'm Tabitha Hassell. Happy Wednesday morning. I wasn't here yesterday. I've got a cold. I have a sore throat, but I'm going to get through it this morning because we've got some things to talk about. No funny videos. If you're used to watching the show, I usually play a funny video ahead of time. It's kind of funny because I have one, and it's a really funny one, but I get in trouble by Facebook every single time I play them. So I'm not going to do that today. Running a few minutes late, not unusual for me if you know me, unfortunately. I am not exactly good with the time clock. We do have Colonel Joe Adams popping in with us this morning. He's going to talk to us and lend us some information. And I'm really happy to talk to Colonel Adams because there's a couple of different things going on. And of course, Carl over on YouTube. Carl, I have no idea how you manage to get into the show and leave comments before I join. I'm not sure how you do that. I didn't even think it was up on YouTube yet. But thank you for joining us. Good morning, Rob. Some of the things we're going to talk about today is we're going to do an update, of course, on the Nancy Guthrie case. We're going to talk about why are these different airspaces closed. Now, Carl made a comment before the show even started that there could be three. I know of two: Santa Fe, New Mexico, El Paso, Texas. All of a sudden, very abruptly, these airports have closed to all incoming, outgoing traffic. What is going on? Some say Cuba, some say Iran. We're going to talk about Netanyahu being in Washington, D.C. yesterday, meeting with Donald Trump, talking about the potential strike against, of course, Iran. So those are going to be some of the things I want to talk about today. We're going to be talking about kidnapping cases. Colonel Joe Adams, when he joins us here in about 2 seconds, he's going to talk to us a little bit about that because, if you've noticed, if you watch some of the Nancy Guthrie coverage, current law enforcement, they have no idea. They don't know anything about kidnappings for ransom because it just does not happen here in the United States. It just does not happen. It's so extremely rare. Like I said the other day, they don't even track how many Americans are kidnapped for ransom. Now, illegals kidnap illegals for ransom often. That's actually very common. It's actually happened in Tucson, and that is because illegals are not going to contact the law enforcement because, of course, they don't want to be deported. They don't want to draw that attention to themselves. So, and the ransom is usually not very high. So that happens often. This case, I still don't think it's a kidnapping. I think the investigation is completely botched. We're going to talk to Colonel Joe Adams. And Colonel Adams, I'm not trying to age you, by the way. And Kim, good morning, Kim. Brenda says El Paso airport grounding has been lifted. Really? Well, that's even stranger. Even stranger. Colonel Joe Adams with the Washington Guard popping in to join us this morning. Good morning, Colonel Adams. Thank you for your patience this morning with me as I'm getting my things together. I've been rushing around trying to find a source to why those airports have been closed. How are you doing this morning, Colonel Adams?
Well, I was planning on sleeping in today, but then Carl started texting me, I understand who Carl is. Okay, Carl is in charge of the Washington Guard's communications electronics. That's why he's up on all this stuff. I rely a lot on him. He's one of my most valuable members of the Washington Guard. And I contacted, or I had Deanna contact you last night or yesterday. There was a couple of things I was trying to clear up that's going on. I was sitting out on the porch yesterday, smoking my cigar, and Deanna come out and she says, you're really concentrating on something. What's going on? I said, well, it's the Guthrie case. And I said, I think we got a situation here where the case is with flatline. And any good investigator, most of the public doesn't know this, it's the technique that when the last thing you want as an investigator is a case to go flatline. There was no information coming in, you're rehashing the old stuff. That's the last thing. And then I asked Deanna, I said, what have I told you and taught you about flatline? She says, you have to raise the emotion. So as an investigator, a lot of times the FBI was stalemated. They would call me in because I have a different way of approaching things, but you need to change the emotion to get it back into the public and keep the momentum going. And lo and behold, overnight, the video surfaced, which changed everything. Now we're back flying high again. So that's what happened. In fact, there was an former FBI investigator on TV this morning. I didn't see it. Deanna did, saying that the case has been flatlined for the last couple of days. Then we had this revelation. So I was right, flatline. Very, very dangerous. Also, that's what's one thing I want to tell you about flatline cases. They have to come up with something, and God was there and took care of them. Okay, uh, people continuously ask me why were those characters or character or whatever in the house for 40 minutes. Now,
They weren't in the house for 40 minutes.
Excuse me.
They weren't in the house for 40 minutes. That's a misconception in time.
So how long were they in the house?
Well, here's the thing. It's a misconception in time. At least that's my view on things. Is what we have to remember. I wrote a whole article about this on social media. What we have to remember is that at 1:47 a.m., the suspect. I'm going to play a video of the suspect in a minute, and we're going to go back to the flatlining of the case here in just a moment. But I'll explain the timeline first. At 1:47 a.m., that is when the suspect approaches the doorbell camera. At 1:47 a.m. So and we saw that video. Obviously now, thankfully, we have that Nest video footage. Now at 2:12 a.m., a person is detected on the interior camera. So somewhere within Nancy's home, I haven't heard where it is. There is an interior sensor. I don't know if it's a sensor. In my house, I have sensors in interior. I don't have cameras indoors. And so if something moves in my house, it's going to set off the sensor. Now, I don't know if that's the case with Nancy or if it was a camera, but either way, at 2:12, movement is detected within Nancy's home. And so that's from 1:47 a.m. to 2:12 a.m. What we don't know between that time is, did it take that long for the person to break in to gain entry, and then they're seen, inside the home? Or were they inside the home already? Did they get in right away? And it just took them a while before that camera picked them up. So that's the part we don't know. Now, what we do know is that at 2:12 a.m., a person was detected in the home. At 2:20, I think it was 2:28 a.m., is when Nancy, her pacemaker, lost its Bluetooth signal with her cell phone Apple devices, her watch and her phone, which are of course left at the scene. So that means between 2:12, when somebody is seen on that sensor, and 2:28 a.m., Nancy has been moved far enough away from the home for her pacemaker to disconnect. And the reason why I know it has to be a little bit of a distance is because I have an implanted device. I've talked about that before. And my device also connects to my phone. And I can leave my phone, let's say, in my bedroom, and I can walk out around the house, and it still maintains that connection. I have to go all the way out. I have a pretty long driveway. I have to make my way out, halfway through the driveway before it loses that connection. So I think that between 1:47 a.m., again, that's when we see the person on the doorbell. We don't know how long it took them to gain entry. 2:12 a.m., they're censored inside the home. Or was it Nancy censored inside the home? We still don't know, what happened. Did Nancy get up because she heard someone? Did she open the door? We still don't know. And then by, of course, 2:28 a.m., she is far enough away from the home. So in my opinion, it actually happened pretty quick, but most people think it didn't.
Well, I can still answer the dilemma.
Yes.
I'm only speaking from personal experiences. When we detected that the perps were in a home or business for an extended period of time, they were doing a couple of things. It's turned into a robbery. They're looking for certain particular things. They know she comes from a wealthy family, or they're looking for a safe and then trying to force the person to open the safe. But now I know a lot about safes and a lot about women dealing with safes. Women don't do good with safes. Now you've got an 84-year-old woman trying to remember the combination, and that takes time. And we know that she was injured in some way or form.
Correct.
Was she tortured? I hate to say that word, but when people spend a lot of time in a place like that, it's an additional form of robbery. Now, the scariest thing is if they were in that house even longer than 15 minutes, her meds are right there.
Correct.
They didn't bother taking her meds. Now, two reasons. One, they have access to those meds. And the other is, if the perps don't take the person's meds, especially if she's 84 years old, then they're not really concerned about the person surviving this episode. That's dangerous. That's scary. And she's bleeding. That's it. So
Correct.
those two things. But I saw the video, and I was shocked how really amateur night that person was on that deck out front.
I agree. So let's just pause for a second because I want to backtrack a little bit on a couple things you've talked about before we get too far down the line. You talked about the case flatlining. Now, when yesterday, was it yesterday? I think it was yesterday, where things seem pretty slow. The night before on Saturday, I remember thinking, okay, the reporters are going to go home. There's nothing more to be gained here. The ransom on it was Monday. Sorry, since I wasn't here yesterday, I'm getting my days all mixed up. On Monday, the ransom deadline was Monday at 5 p.m. And when 5 p.m. came and gone, we all kind of thought, okay, that's it. Now we just got to sit back and wait and see what develops down the line. And I think that's what you called the flatlining. And that is exactly what it was. A lot of the reporters did leave the area. There was nothing going on. We were talking about next steps in the investigation, what were investigators going to do long term, to try to solve this case. And we knew that FBI agents were going to flood the area. We'd heard that new resources being brought in. And then two things happened that kind of revived the case. Unfortunately, one of them I don't think anyone knows about. I feel like I'm the only person that knows about this. Is number one, Nancy Grace released a video yesterday. It was a live video. On that live video, she said Savannah Guthrie paid the ransom. The ransom was paid. It was paid and it was received by 5 p.m. on Monday. Now, I've not heard anyone else say that or anyone else talk about it. So did Nancy Grace misspeak? I don't think so. She's a veteran. I don't think she misspoke. We had TMZ all of a sudden jumping back in and monitoring the Bitcoin, transaction. And we can go down that road later about the Bitcoin and the transaction and the ransom. And then, of course, we have the Nest camera. We had all these experts who said there was no way possible to gain that Nest camera footage because she didn't have the subscription. It didn't save to the device. It didn't save to the cloud. And all of a sudden, thankfully, thank God for this, Colonel Adams, is that they were able to get that footage. And then now we're going to go back to your point about how when you watch this footage, you can tell this person has no idea what they're doing. It's like, okay, so do they know the camera? I'm going to play the video here in a second. You see them stumble up to the camera, they see the camera. They've got this hideous mask on, which wasn't very well planned mask. They could have certainly found a better mask. And it's believed that they wore 2 masks, 2 sets of clothing, 2 pairs of gloves or more. And you're going to see all this play out. And they're kind of bumbling around. Oh, there's a camera there. Then they reach down and grab some flowers and try to put the flowers in front of the camera. That's not somebody who planned this out. So let's take a look, first of all, at the video. Then we'll break this down. I'm going to play that one more time. Okay, so this person grabs some flowers. They come back up. They're putting the flowers in front of the camera, trying to hide the camera. If this person knew what they were doing, for a person who didn't know what they were doing, they probably would have brought, a can of spray paint. They would have disguised themselves a little bit better while they walk up and approach the camera. So, Colonel Adams, did this person know that doorbell camera was there, or did they just think the mask was enough to protect themselves?
Either way, that wasn't very professional. Also, the gloves. I mean, I would be wearing surgical gloves where I still got sensitivity and touch, and I can do things. And of course, the first thing that I spot, because of who I am, my background, is the gun. I mean, talk about a a misplaced, unprofessional weapon. I think that might even be a holster for a revolver. I can't tell what kind of gun it is. It looks
It's
like a flat magazine fed, but I can't tell.
it's
Uh,
very difficult to tell, and a lot of people have commented, and you might know more about this certainly than I do, but some people said that that is a common weapon replacement for the cartel. Now I find that hard to believe, but people call that a cartel holster or something like that. But before we get too far, Colonel Adams, I want to explain, to you and anyone who's listening. While I understand a ransom note was sent in, I understand that a ransom was paid according to Nancy Guthrie. I still absolutely 100% do not believe this was a kidnapping for ransom. I still absolutely do believe that whatever shenanigans have taken place here, this is all related to somebody who knows Nancy Guthrie.
right. So I'm taking the obvious rule, the fact that I only can make an opinion on what I see and what I've been told. And of course, we know there's a lot of stuff going on in the background, and there always is to
Yes.
control the case. But thank God for the FBI. But that also sends a message to a lot of people out there how far they can go back, even if it's a self-contained, non-subscribed camera. And the biggest joke in the world is people who sign on to, and I'm sorry if I offend somebody, nobody in their tactical correct mind would ever sign on to the cloud. The cloud is nothing but an NSA listening device. No, I get constant emails, whatever. Your cloud is expired. Your cloud is expired. Your cloud's no good. I didn't ask for the cloud, and I would never subscribe to that. That's insane. Now, here's what here's what I teach. The number one thing in the Guard: somewhere, sometime, you're going to be on your own. Nancy was on her own. So what can I do as a son to help my mother protect herself? She's not going to go to the range and use firearms. She's not going to do it. But I could fortify the house and even harden the front door. When I say harden the front door, people have to understand 85% of the home invasion in this country come through the front door. So if you harden the front door, period, I'm not talking about bulletproofing, but being aware of the chance that odds are better than Vegas, they're going to the front door. And where do they go? To the front door. This clown messing with that camera is, I don't know what to say. I expected a lot more professional than what he was doing, unless it was intentional.
It was unusual. Not only that, but we hear now Ashley Banfield is a reporter. She's worked on cases for a very long time. So we've not heard anything officially from investigators, but Ashley Banfield, through a source, just like we have many sources, she has a source that she can trust. She was told that there was forced entry, but we don't know at which door. And we know that the back door was left open. Now, Colonel Adams, my guess, and again, I'm just speculating, if you look at Nancy's front door, it looks like a solid wooden door. She does have a glass panel, next to each door. The glass panels were not broken. You'd think that would be the first thing somebody would do to gain quick entry, would break that glass, reach around, unlock the door, and go in. They didn't do that. We don't know where the forced entry occurred. The only thing we do know is that the back door was open. Nancy came out through the front. And again, what's so strange about this investigation is that the investigators, of course, they're going down the kidnapping trail because I feel like they have to. They have no choice. There was a ransom demand. Allegedly, a ransom has been paid. Of course, they've got to go down the kidnapping trail. But what is so strange about this whole case is whoever this person is not a professional kidnapper. There's no question about that. B, we have a situation where I do think the investigation has been bungled to a degree. C, regardless of how much they talk about kidnappers and ransoms, the investigators still continue to hover around the daughter's home. I don't know how much you followed the case outside of, talk with people but the investigation has largely centered around the daughter's home. And of course, Ashley Banfield, again, her source, who she wholeheartedly trusts, just like we trust our sources, her source told her that the son-in-law was at that time the primary suspect. Now, he had not been named as a suspect. Investigator denied he was ever a suspect, But still, the daughter's home has been searched numerous times. It's extremely obvious. They went in with luminol. They removed a piece of drywall out of her home, and then we hear that the investigators have contacted neighbors. Now, Nancy's daughter lived 10 miles from Nancy's home. Investigators contacted the HOA, and they informed the neighbors between Nancy's house and between Annie's house that investigators would be out, that they would be searching their properties. Leave your gates open. They're going to come out and look. And then investigators released a statement. I don't know how many people heard the statement, which in this case, it's kind of here and there. But they were out and they were talking to, well, let me backtrack. Investigators did not release the statement. A neighbor stated it. And the neighbor stated that investigators told them that they were looking for a man who was seen walking between the daughter's home and Nancy's home. And then I kept thinking, okay, so there's a guy out walking between these two homes. He's obviously their suspect. Then we see this video. I'm like, okay, well, that's probably the guy. There's no obvious vehicle there. Maybe this guy's out walking like an idiot. He's got reflectors on, which is even crazier. And they were looking for that video. Then yesterday, of course, they were out hitting it hard over at the daughter's house. They were up and down her street. They were knocking on doors, asking to go into people's homes, looking around their yards, looking in their outbuildings. To me, the investigation is still centered around that daughter and her husband and the area between the daughter home and Nancy's home. There has to be some reason why they're focusing in that area and on these people.
Yeah. Obviously, they're not talking about it, but again, for your listeners, this is very important. Okay, now I would consider myself a residential commercial security expert, and I'll disclose this. The system that controls this house, there's only 10 of these systems in the United States. My home and 9 federal banks. So you can imagine.
But the average person, A, doesn't have that knowledge, and B, maybe can't afford it. I mean, I own a security company, so I see where you're coming from. The first thing I thought when I saw this case is this woman, her security is not properly being looked after by her family.
Right. But more than just the security, your backup system, which has cost us 5 days at least. And thank God for the FBI that has the ability to go back inside it. And how they do that, I have no idea. But in our home here, we have a backup system, and it only rolls over every week. Some of these systems roll over every hour, which means the other stuff's erased. Not only do I have a backup system that God couldn't find here, I also have another system backup off campus that's not government, that's private, and it controls everything. In fact, I could leave this facilities, go to that facilities, and control my system here and access everything. So I've got a backup to my backup. So that's what's important. Just because you have surveillance cameras hooked to a DVR. In the old days, they used to rob a house and take the DVR with it.
Right, I remember that.
Right. The old days, right? Well, no, not anymore. So that's the one thing. If you do it, don't just back it up again, and your recording time, you've got to expand it, because I can go back if something happens, and let's say I went someplace, came back a couple of days later, and an incident happened. I'm able to go back days and recover that.
Correct.
So there's more to security than just having cameras.
Well, no question about it. And in this particular case, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but not too long ago, Nancy had no security system at all in place. Now, whether or not she had an alarm on her house, I do not know. I'm guessing that she did not. However, she went on to her Nextdoor app, and this happens sometimes with elderly people. They're not thinking security conscious. She goes onto her Nextdoor app and she asks a question. Hey, what do you recommend that I purchase for security? I'm thinking about getting a doorbell camera. I'm thinking about getting some cameras up around my home. And so that alerted anyone on Nextdoor that here you have this woman who's, an elderly woman. She does not have cameras already. Gee, where does this lady live? And then I don't know who set up the cameras for her. That I don't know. but she did eventually purchase, this Nest camera that goes on her front door. I believe there was one on the back of the house. I heard she had two cameras, one on the front, one on the back, some type of sensor indoor. I don't know if it was I heard it was a camera. I don't know if it was a camera or a sensor, but she's just not, like a lot of people, not security conscious. But more than anything, I feel like, and I don't want to blame the family, but her family failed her, because if you have an elderly family member, you have to take it upon yourself, to make sure that family member is safe. And in Nancy's case, her subscription to her Nest cameras had expired. I don't know if it was her that was responsible for that subscription, one of her children, but either way, that should have never happened. This woman should have been protected, as all people should. And, there's a lot of ways to do that. And people had even suggested to her through this Nextdoor app that, hey, why don't you buy some trail cameras? And by the way, she did mention in the Nextdoor app that she wasn't concerned about security. She was looking for the cameras so she could see wildlife. She didn't mention security. She mentioned wildlife. And people said, well, if you're worried about wildlife, why don't you get a couple of trail cams? They have javelinas in that area. She liked watching the javelinas. Now, Colonel Adams, it's easy for you and I to say this. I own a security company. You're a legend, of course, in many different fields. I mean, if you came to my house, I don't want to give away all my secrets. I have 2 alarm systems. I have trail cameras. I have sensors in the woods. I live in a wooded area. There's a lot of different things, fail safes I have in place. If you came and looked around my house, there's cameras that face every single angle, double cameras in some areas. But that's us, because that's our business. But a lot of other people, they just don't get it.
One thing, I'd like to punch your son in the face, because he's the one who should have stood up and done something about it. Not some 84-year-old lady calling the neighbor about it.
Okay. He didn't live in the area. He lives in Virginia, but that's no excuse.
That extremely pisses me off. Okay. Second thing is, they're talking about they can't have cameras at night because it's too dark. Bullshit. Oh, I'm sorry about that.
Spotlights. They can't have spotlights.
Trump said it, so I'll stop. I'll try not to. In my cameras video color at night. Most people think you can't get color. No. What I did was I went to the military and got giant military IR enhancers. So I'm able to say, no, that car wasn't black. It pulled up at midnight. It was red, because my video shows colors at night. It's no big.
All my cameras, you know what? All my cameras show color at night. But here's the thing, Colonel Adams. Technology has changed, as you know. It is very easy and very inexpensive to do in a way like Nancy did. They just didn't do it the right way. Anyone could go down to your Walmart for about $300, buy an entire set of Blink cameras, or buy a set of Arlo cameras or Nest cameras. These days, most of them do have night vision. Most of them do have color, where you can see the colors. Like I said, all of mine do, and they were not overly expensive cameras. And there's a lot of things people can do to protect themselves. And I hope they do. I hope people see the situation with Nancy and they say, hey, I need to take care of myself, or the kids speak up, or family members and say, hey, I've got an elderly family member. You don't expect something to happen, but yet it can and does happen.
Well, the thing about, okay, now why would you want color at night? Because you can describe things better. Okay, we have facial recognition here. There's nobody that comes on this property that they're not photographed, right? And every camera is backed up with audio. Anything that's said, any kind of noise, but your IR enhanced cameras only go out as far as your IR can reach. That's why we enhanced this. So my cameras reach out 100 yards in every direction through the woods, and I got color because I know how to enhance it. Thanks to the military. So there's more to it. And that's very, very important as far as solving crimes. Was it a black car or was it a red car? I don't know if we got black and white cameers.
But most people either way, they're not going to do that. Most people are going to have a doorbell camera. I always tell people, Colonel Adams, nobody's going to go out and buy a system like you have. I mean, most people couldn't afford it. Most people wouldn't be able to access some of these things. But just about anybody can go to a Walmart and buy a couple of cameras. Put a camera in the front, put a camera in the back, even if it's not colorized. At least you have something. At least you have something.
Yeah, what's your life worth? So. Let's get away from that, because I get upset about this whole thing, leaving that lady by herself. I mean, it just really pisses me off.
Being the fact that her daughter is a wealthy person, she certainly should have made sure her mother had proper security. The son lives in Virginia. Not that that's any excuse. Her daughter, of course, lives nearby and only 10 miles away. But let's backtrack again, okay, for just a few minutes. Now, here we have a person who has come to the home. They're wearing a mask. You can see their eyes, you can see their lips. Quite honestly, on January 6th in Washington, D.C., investigators saw a whole lot less of people, and they were still able to use facial recognition to see who they were and go out and arrest them. I haven't heard of any talk of facial recognition in this case, and maybe there's not enough, but there certainly was. I know there was on January 6th. There was a medical professional who was there on January 6th, and he had a bandana and a hat on. All you could see were his eyes, and they were able to locate him through facial recognition. Now, I can't go down that road with you because I don't know. So let's talk about the ransom, all right? Because you know a lot more about ransoms than probably any current law enforcement person, in the United States. And I'm not dating you. You've just worked in a lot of very interesting situations. If you talk to a lot of police officers, now, or a lot of these FBI agents, they've never dealt with a ransom situation. It's not common. It's actually pretty much unheard of an American within the United States getting held for ransom. And I think that's why there's so much disbelief that this could be a true kidnapping for ransom case. Now, normally, Colonel Adams, as we talked about on Monday, when you have a kidnapping for ransom situation, the last thing the kidnapper wants is the media to get involved or the police to get involved. Yet this particular kidnapper sent in a ransom note to TMZ because they weren't giving enough attention to the one they sent into the local CBS affiliate in Tucson. So they brought the attention upon themselves. They sent their Bitcoin link to TMZ, so TMZ can watch the Bitcoin link, which is kind of dumb to begin with. And then, I would assume that it's not common for the family to announce that they've paid the ransom. Now, I know the FBI, I don't know this as a fact in this particular case, but I know in general, the FBI is going to tell a family if there's no proof of life, we strongly don't advise you to send the ransom money because there's no proof of life. You're going to send this money and this person's going to get away with your money and you're not going to get your family member back. But in this case, it sounds like the family, of course, any hope or possibility they could of getting their family back, according to Nancy Grace, they did pay the $6 million ransom. But of course, it wasn't announced to the media, but that's fairly normal, I would guess.
Yeah, with her money, I'd have said pay it too.
Yeah.
Pay it too,
Yeah, she'll make another $8 million next year, $6 million. While it's a lot of money, that's almost a yearly salary for her, but she's got plenty to go around, of course. But it's not easy, you have to have cash. Unless maybe she already had $6 million in Bitcoin. A lot of people do, surprisingly enough, but it's a really strange situation. Now, of course, they sent in the ransom by the deadline, which was 5 p.m. on Monday. The alleged kidnapper was supposed to return Nancy within 12 hours. And of course, that didn't happen. Now, I'm assuming you saw that they detained a person of interest yesterday. Did you see that person?
Yeah. And
you see that they were released, right?
Right.
Now, I'm going to play a very quick video here. This is Carlos. I'm going to say his name. I know I'm going to butcher his name. Palazuela. And Carlos was I don't know if I'm assuming this was a targeted stop. He was driving. I think investigators thought he was heading to the border. He was down in Rio Rico, Arizona, which is just 20 miles from the border. And I think that they had to stop him before he got that far. They didn't know where he was going. Turns out he's a FedEx driver. He's a door dasher. They said he was out, completing a door dash when this arrest occurred. Or not arrest, sorry, detainment. I have to be very careful with my words here. Detainment. They pulled him over. They took him in for questioning. Everybody, of course, sleuthing online, looking for his photos, trying to figure out who he is, what he's about, and everything else. His mother-in-law, who he lived with, of course, with this investigation, everywhere police go, the reporters follow. Sometimes they're there ahead of investigators. And they interviewed his mom. I'm not going to play that, or his mother-in-law there. I'm not going to play that video. She said, no way, he didn't do this. He's not involved. There's nobody here. The investigators thought Nancy was in the home. She's like, nope, nobody's here. And then I wake up this morning and I find out, well, this guy was released. He was detained. He was questioned. He was released. And we're going to talk in a second about how common this is. But let me play this video.
Hey,
yes.
Tab, I just remembered there was one other thing. But
yes.
We're going to have to talk about it right now. But I have an angle to solve this that people will, at first they will think, well, that's insane. But if you think about what I'm about to tell you, you'll say, yeah, why not? So you go ahead and do your.
Hold that thought for 1 second. We're going to play this video and talk about this for a second, then we're going to jump back into that.
You're going to love the way my brain works. You're going to love it.
Apprehended for questioning, how would you describe what happened to you?
Terrifying. Something I didn't do for something. I was being like, I felt like I was being kidnapped, bro, because they didn't tell me anything at the beginning.
And investigators showed up to this house, or were you the one who was pulled over in the traffic stop?
I was the one that was pulled over at the traffic stop.
Where was that?
Right here on by Chubasco.
Okay, and you were taken into custody at that point?
Yeah.
And you were.
I was being detained.
Detained. Okay.
I was detained the whole time.
Okay.
That's what they told me.
Where were they
At
holding
the
you?
back of a car.
Back of
a
a car.
Miranda car, and then they moved me into a Pima County Sheriff.
Were you being questioned in the car?
At the Miranda car, I was being questioned, but they only asked me for my first name, my last name, my date of birth, and my social.
Okay. What were they asking you about?
Where my whereabouts.
Okay.
Where do I work? Where was I, and all that. But
are you ever up in Tucson?
yeah, I work in Tucson.
What do you do?
GLS, deliver packages.
Okay. Do you think you might have delivered a package to Nancy Guthrie's house?
I don't know. Might have been a possibility. I don't know.
Yeah. Do you ever deliver like Amazon packages or anything?
Well, it's kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so he's a FedEx driver. He works for DoorDash. We know that the day that it was discovered that Nancy had been abducted, that was that Sunday afternoon. Anyone who arrived saw that there was an Amazon package there. Some other type of package in a brown envelope, could have also been Amazon, I'm not sure. So there were two packages there. We heard yesterday that investigators have taken DNA samples from anyone who worked around the home. She had a housekeeper, a gardener, a pool person, I'm not sure who else, but those folks have all had their DNA. So obviously that investigation has been moving out to those intermediate areas as expected. That's just a normal thing. Now, Colonel Adams, when they detain somebody in an investigation, clearly detainment doesn't mean guilt. It means that there's some reason for them to believe this person could be involved. I've heard it had something to do with the Bitcoin and them honing in on the Bitcoin. I don't know if that's true or not, just a rumor. They detained this guy, they questioned him, they released him, but that happens all the time. I don't think this guy had anything to do with it whatsoever. Remember when the United Healthcare guy got shot in New York City? They detained a guy and everybody said, oh, it's him. And this guy had a gun, he was in town, all these weird things were going on. Then they let him go, had nothing to do with him. So it's common, right, for people to be detained, questioned. We just don't usually see it because these cases aren't usually as public as this is.
Yeah, but also that adds to the emotion of a case to keep the emotion going. It made the news. You've got to keep the emotion. This is human beings. You've got to keep the emotional aspect of these things going. No flatline. That's the kiss of death. I will say at this point, the odds are that if she's still alive is not good. Only because of my background. Not good. If I would give it,
yeah, I can't imagine.
Yeah, I hope she's fine, but she got about a 20% chance of surviving this thing.
In my opinion, less. I said on day one, literally day one, that there was no way that she was still alive because I knew this wasn't a kidnapping for ransom, a real kidnapping for ransom. I will be shocked if it turns out that it is. And anyone who would take an elderly woman from their home is not taking them to put them in a closet and feed them and give them medication and keep them alive. And I hate to say that, and I'm hoping and praying, I say a prayer every day that she and so many like her who are missing, are found safe. Now back to you, Colonel Adams. You said you had an idea. Now, as far as what, solving the investigation, solving the crime?
Okay, hypothetically, like in the old days when the FBI would get jammed up, they'd call me in and boom, right? I found people the FBI could not find. They didn't say, we haven't found them yet, we can't find them. Okay, so I got to thinking about this thing. How would I solve this case? How would I First of all, the most important thing is recovering the lady. Everything else is second, right? I don't care about the money. I don't care about anything. I don't care about the bad guys. All I care about is bringing Nancy home. How would I do that? I would need help. And you know who I would reach out to? The cartel. The cartel, the police officers run the city, surface-wise. The cartel runs the underbelly. Now, why did I say that? This is not new. Back in the 80s, when I had to testify before Congress and the Senate Foreign Relations Committee on the Iran-Contra crap, which you know I was in the middle of, they asked me about Omar Gaddafi and me. Now, Omar Gaddafi, of course, was in those days a world-known terrorist, the Lockerbie, Scotland bomb, all that. Worst man on the planet. But I'm running an intelligence operation in Southeast Asia. And to defeat the enemy, this junta that had taken over the country, if we had shoulder-held missiles, it would make a difference. So I, through channels, including Muhammad Ali, got to Gaddafi and tried to convince him that, hey, you need a facelift. What if all of a sudden you're helping your brother Muslims in Burma, and all of a sudden it kind of takes away your stink because you are a wanted terrorist. And people will think, gee, yeah, he's a terrorist, but he helped those people, and especially the Muslim community. You need a facelift. Okay, fast forward. Who's the biggest enemy on our borders? The cartel, and they're here. Cartel is actively working and participating and organized in Tucson. They know things the police don't know. So I would go to the cartel and say, hey, you need a facelift. How'd you like to save an 84-year-old woman and make world TV about the cartel? People will think, because you know how people forget, oh, I guess the cartel is not, they'll forget about the drug trafficking and the human slavery and all that. Oh, well, they helped bring her home. What a great publicity stunt.
Except for there's no one to do that anymore, Colonel Adams. So many things in life have changed, right? Now we have zero tolerance policies in schools. You used to be able to fight in hockey. Now they discourage it. And the same goes in law enforcement. They don't have really people that do those types of operations like they used to have, and maybe you should volunteer your services to go out and do something that no one else knows to do. I was just listening yesterday to a podcast of some, investigators, and they said, hey, this is not in our territory. And these were middle-aged people, they were even, they were older than me, and they were saying, this is not our territory. In our investigative careers, in the FBI, there have really been no kidnapping for ransom type situations in the United States. And they're like, this is new territory for all of us. We don't know what to do. Back in your time, these things did happen on the other side of the border, and it did happen to some degree in the United States, but it doesn't happen anymore. And I don't know that they have those resources like they used to go out, and make those connections or be that hardball about it like you guys were back in your time. I feel like everybody's kind of soft these days and political, and they've got a lot of red tape and bureaucracy going on.
That's why they call me that.
Maybe they're doing that, but I don't think so.
They had that back then. Red tape. And the FBI goes like, that's it. There's done.
Right. And David makes a good point. And David, I'm thinking of the long time. Who's to say they aren't doing that now? I don't know, David. They could certainly be doing that now. And we just don't know. We don't know everything that's going on behind the scenes.
Here's why law enforcement would never participate in that. Because if the cartel did find her, and they would, and they could, and they will, they have the ability to, it would embarrass law enforcement, which is part of my pitch to the cartel. Hey, it's a win-win for you. It's a facelift, and guess what? You just beat law enforcement again. Right. I'm telling you, I know. Okay, so it sounds crazy from your end. From my end,
it doesn't sound crazy from my end. I've watched plenty of movies. I've seen it happen in the movies.
But here's one thing that most people don't know. You know this, that the cartel had $1 million bounty on my head when I was with Border Patrol. They know me. I didn't stop them, but I put a dent in their armor, and they put a bounty on my head. So here's a guy who is wanted by the cartel, willing to pay for my death, now asking them, I mean, bizarre. Talk about a movie script. But I'm telling you, it would work.
Like I said, maybe you need to give them a little ring and volunteer your services. I don't know what they're doing. And like David said, there's probably a lot. So we know there's so many things going on behind the scenes. But let's look at this from a different angle. I know we're looking at it as a cartel potential kidnapping. Apparently they are too, to some degree, because otherwise they wouldn't have went after this Carlos Pela, I know I'm going to get that right, Venezuelas, you know what I mean. But let's look at it from a different aspect, because Brenda also asked, if it's not, a cartel kidnapping, what did they want? Why would they take why would they take Nancy from her home? So let's change gears. Let's say it's not a cartel, it's a fake, it's a hoax. The ransom note was sent in, maybe extortion, maybe distraction from the case. We know that investigators have focused so much around the home of Nancy's daughter, Annie, and her husband, Tommaso. And that doesn't necessarily mean anything. It could be that, they just haven't been able to clear them yet. As we know, they're going to make their process through the family first and clear them as they go. And if they hit a roadblock where they can't clear somebody or prove where someone was, they're going to look into them further. So it could just be no more than that. But here's the thing, Colonel Adams, and that's just another avenue of this investigation, we have to consider. And it could be this investigation moves in a completely different direction away from Annie and her husband now that this new video has been released from the Nest camera. But let's just go back to that for a moment. Nancy was taken from her home. Now, most crimes that occur, whether it's a sexual assault or a robbery, and someone's injured or someone's killed, they leave them in the home. They don't take them with them. And that lends to, of course, the kidnapping, abduction theory. But at the same time, we see the blood spots. Now, I don't know what took place inside the home. As far as investigators are concerned, they say there is blood in the home. They won't talk about that blood. Now, on day one of the investigation, there was a lot of information released that then they later backtracked on. And some of that information was that they found enough blood in the home to suggest there was a probable death that occurred. Now, investigators did not say that. That's what other people on the scene had heard, reporters and so on. There was a reporter, because this scene was not secure. Part of the reason why I think this is a very botched investigation, the scene was not secured. And a lot of investigators saw evidence long before, reporters saw evidence before investigators did. Now, there is a reporter out there who has a photo. I've not seen the photo of Nancy's bed, and they said there were some blood droplets on her bed. Nothing more than what you might see in a nosebleed is how they termed it. Now, they did not discuss the blood that was in the home, but we know there is blood in the home besides what's on the bed. Now, you can see a trail of blood from the front door, droplets that concentrate right outside the front door because they probably stopped, closed the door. Then you see the droplets go on all the way out to the driveway where you would expect Nancy was entered into a vehicle at that point, because they kind of end at the driveway. And here's what's so crazy, Colonel Adams, and I'm going to sidetrack us for a second, then we'll get back on track, is this is also why I think the investigation was botched, because on day one, a reporter, I believe it was from News Nation, followed the droplet trail from the front door to the driveway. But only yesterday did I see investigators said, oh, we found more blood. We thought it was only on the front porch. Now we see there's a trail to the driveway. Why didn't they see that on day one or listen to the reporter who did? That's a whole separate situation. But so we know that Nancy was injured, that DNA was tested, it was hers. So they took her from the home. Now, why would they take her from the home other than a kidnapping? Could it be because it was somebody who knew her, and they knew if they found her, it would be more likely that it would lead to them? I mean, does that even make any sense? I'm trying to make sense why she was taken from her home if it was not a kidnapping.
Well, I think it was a kidnapping for ransom. There's lots of other players in that family that they could have done this to without harming her. If I was still working and they had captured my mother, I would go on TV and say, you better hope the cops find you before I do.
Right.
You are dead. And it's not going to be a fast death. it just makes me mad that this old lady and all these years lived her life, good person, has to go through this. And she's in this
I agree.
problem. This problem comes back to the family. And I know that Savannah right now is thinking this was all my fault. You know something? It is.
What makes you think that it's her fault?
They didn't do anything to help her. They put her in a subdivision that's black. I've been in that subdivision. And I think I said before, when I dropped off my golf partner in Tucson to that subdivision, I got lost coming out.
It's very dark. Yeah, it is very dark. You know, they don't have street lights. They don't, because of the HOA, they don't have, you threw me for a second when you said it's all black. At first I thought you were talking about people. I'm like, it's not. but I get what you're saying. It's dark. It's dark.
It's a burglar's paradise. Now, I guarantee one thing, there's some security companies canvassing that neighborhood right now, and their business is going to be booming because if anybody who doesn't have that,
I agree,
is going to get it. And so,
I couldn't agree more.
People are going to start cutting them shrubs down too, after the fact.
After the fact, you're right. And sometimes that happens in cases. People learn from a case that goes public. They think, oh, gee, you know, I'm going to be careful. I don't do that anymore. You know, like me, so many people have gone missing in these state and federal parks that never in a million years would I walk alone in a park because of all of the people over the years that have gone missing in those parks. But in this case, I know you and I disagree on this, and you're probably right, and I'm probably wrong. I don't think it was a kidnapping. I think it's a possibility that somebody, and I'm not blaming this on the son-in-law. I don't know anything about him. I don't think he looks like somebody that would do this. I can't imagine her daughter would do this to her. But, you know, you always have to go back to that situation that is, you know, allegedly her daughter and her husband were having financial problems. Nancy was at their home. That's the last place she was seen alive. He is the person who drove her home. And I think that's why the suspicion is placed on him versus someone else. And, you know, there's always that possibility that the subject of money came up and something happened and somebody snapped and something happened. Now, that doesn't mean that's what happened. It is, like Jay said on the comment line, there's a lot of speculation going on because that's all you can do. You look at the facts, you look at the statements investigators are made, you read between the lines, and you speculate. You know, there's a lot of speculation that could happen, but I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that somebody staged what looks like, you know, a kidnapping, but you know, but it could be a real kidnapping too. You know, yesterday investigators stated for the first time that there are persons of interest, not just one person, persons, multiple people who they believe are involved. Well, and that lends more to the kidnapping theory.
Yeah. There's a 50-50 chance they'll find that dummy who was on the front porch. They'll find him dead someplace. But forensic. They hope they find him dead, which will lead to the other guys. Let me tell you about state of mind in that area. And I experienced it back to security. When I bought this ranch, when I bought my ranch, and I'm in the middle of a forest. Now, of course, I've cleared back all the brush so my cameras can do their job. It's called a killing zone. People could have walked right up on my house and been 20 yards away, and I couldn't have seen them. I can see them now. It's called a killing zone in combat. Go into build a compound, destroy everything around you because you can see the bad guys coming. When I bought this ranch, and I'm touring it, and I said to the owner, where's your security system? And he said, we don't have one. I said, well, you live in the middle of nowhere. Right. You have no neighbors. Aren't you concerned? He says, well, here it comes. He said, well, we never thought we needed one. And that's that subdivision I'm talking about out there in Tucson. It's a peaceful neighborhood. They're nice people. It's the outsiders. It's not the people inside the neighborhood. It's people that come there to prey on them.
Right.
That's going to change. My own experience was, we didn't think. And this guy had 3 kids and a wife, you know, here by themselves. Why we didn't think we needed one. Well, he was wrong. And the first thing I did before we moved in was, bam, I called my specialist. We were already up and running before we put the first piece of furniture in this house. So, again,
now, Colonel Adams, You're right. And a lot of times it's hindsight. You know, something happens and you're like, gee, I wish I would have had this or did that. That's what hindsight is always great for. And, you know, and people need to learn a lesson. And hey, don't rely on hindsight. You know, prepare yourself now, you know, for any of these things to happen. And I agree with you. I do think that's going to happen. I just want to make a note here, Colonel Adams, real quick. Then I want to talk about the botched investigation. And people do not report RJ Moultrie, because anytime somebody, I've learned the hard way that if you report somebody who makes ridiculous comments on my page, it just hurts the show. I didn't know that. Somebody pointed that out to me recently after I blocked all those folks. Now RJ says, lady, I just read your post. And he said that, this is kind of funny. I got to go back and read this because it's hilarious.
Yeah,
lady, I just read your post. You are sick and your children need to be protected from you. You are protecting a pedo. That's probably somebody who read one of my posts about Donald Trump, who, let me remind you, RJ, has never once, not one time, has Donald Trump been indicted for, charged with, a person of interest in, let alone convicted of any type of pedophilia. So we've got that. So anyway, I just want to school somebody real quick.
I wonder what that post was all about. I was lost. Okay.
We've had a lot of lunatics on the show recently making comments, and I think it's funny. I save them and make fun of them later. Now Donna brought up a good fact, a good question. Of course, insurance money. Typically, 99, I would say, I'm going to go on a stretch here and say maybe 96. Let's say 96% of the time, when something happens to someone, it is somebody within either their inner circle, their intermediate circle, and it's usually the person who it's either a domestic situation, it's a situation of who, you know, is going to profit from this person's death, or it's what they call a moment of passion. People get in a fight over something, they do something they shouldn't have done in the heat of the moment. So typically those are the three reasons why somebody is killed in any situation. You know, kidnapping for ransom is by far less than 1%, by far less than 1%. I don't even know if we could give it the credit of being 1%, but that doesn't mean it can't happen. And it very well could have happened in this case, because obviously Nancy's daughter is Savannah Guthrie. I had no idea who she was until, you know, I started looking her up, but there are people who do. And Savannah did do an interview with her mother not too long ago, where she did talk about how, you know, they were in Tucson and how her mother lived in Tucson, and they talked about that. So it could have drawn attention to her. You know, we certainly don't know. But you also have people who work in the house. You have housekeepers. It's not necessarily that the housekeeper's a bad person, but who does the housekeeper know? You know, how much does the housekeeper's friends and family know about the client she has? The pool guy, same situation. You know, you have a gardener, same situation. You have a situation where people are delivering packages. You know, there's a girl named Jessica Carper, a case I used to talk about quite a bit back in the day, where poor Jessica Carpenter, you know, she knew 2 serial killers. She didn't know they were serial killers. One of them was getting ready to ask her out on a date and planned to kill her. There was another one that was coming into the Red Lobster where she worked and had planned to kill her. And then poor Jessica got sick one day. She didn't go to work on the day one of the serial killers was going to kill her. She stayed home, got killed. Of course, investigators went out and picked up these 2 serial killers. They found out were in her circle, which is how we know they were both planning to kill her. And it turns out, against all odds, there was a delivery driver who had delivered a package to her home a few days before. She opened the door, he handed her the package, and he remembered her. And for whatever reason, this guy just got it in his head that he needed to go back and sexually assault her and kill her. So a couple of days later, he showed up at her front door and he said, hey, you know, remember I left a package here that was left by mistake. You know, do you still have it? She answered the door. He asked for a glass of water. She let him in, and guess what? He sexually assaulted and killed her. So, you know, weird things can happen in cases, very weird things. And you just don't know about people delivering your packages.
Well, in this case, there was either direct contact with the family or indirect contact with the family. They didn't pick up the newspaper and say, oh, Savannah Guthrie's mom lives here. Let's find out where it is. First of all, how they find out. Well, that's not that difficult. No, somebody, I just said the other day, somehow, someplace in time, somebody involved in this, even secondhand information, had face-to-face contact and a working knowledge of the family and Nancy, unfortunately.
Correct. I agree. Now, Colonel Adams, I don't want to talk too much more about this because I want to talk about a couple other things before we head out.
Yeah,
Now, I do want to talk. What's that?
An airspace deal.
We're going to talk about that. That's over now, by the way. It's been lifted, but we're going to talk about it first either way. But now, as far as the investigation, and very briefly, I just want to talk about a botched investigation. Now, anybody listening to the show knows how much I appreciate investigators. I appreciate law enforcement, every branch of law enforcement, but sometimes mistakes are made. In this particular case with Nancy Guthrie, one of the biggest mistakes that was made is that I don't think they took it very seriously in the beginning, or they're just dumb. I don't really know. But they showed up to the scene. They saw the blood droplets. They found DNA evidence. They immediately said, this is a crime scene. It's a crime scene. They immediately called in homicide investigators. That's why it's been believed that they found enough blood inside the home to say that a probable death occurred, because they immediately called in homicide investigators. And, that was one of the first things that they did when they arrived on scene. But here's where things get crazy. They took all the DNA samples, fast-tracked one, and then they immediately released the home to the family. They didn't seal it off as a crime scene. They didn't even keep it for more than an afternoon. And then, we have reporters out trampling all over the place. It's not the reporters' fault. They're going up to Nancy's door. The investigators left the blood droplets there. They didn't clean it off. Nobody cleaned it. Still there. Investigators go up. They see the blood droplets. They track the blood droplets to the driveway, something investigators did not do. Investigators thought the blood droplets stopped on the porch. And here's what's even stranger. There's a blue cloth that was left on a rock. I posted on my Facebook page, a blue cloth, and the investigators the reporters, I keep saying investigators, the reporters didn't want to touch it. They're like, okay, we see it. They took photos of it and video of it, and they're like, what is this? Is it a shirt? It looks like a shirt. What could this be? Investigators did not take it. And what's so crazy about that is that there is a shirt that Nancy was known to wear that was the exact same color of blue. Now, I could be going down on a tangent here about that cloth, and maybe it wasn't there when investigators were there, but I'm sure that it was. Reporters saw it and notated it. Why didn't investigators take it? Why didn't they talk about it? There's just, and then of course investigators had to keep coming back to the scene, still not securing it, but new information would come in, they'd come back out and take a look. They ended up going up on the roof and finding another camera. They should have saw that camera to begin with. They had to come back and search through those cisterns or septic tanks. They should have done that on day one. I mean, what in the world is going on here? I don't get it.
I work with homicide in Tucson probably no less than roughly 100 times, because when I would find a deceased person in the desert while working out there, I got a call in, and I call Border Patrol. Border Patrol contacts homicide, and then homicide shows up. But I always secured the area, so I know these guys. I've called them. I've talked to them since we started the conversation about this. But yeah, I hate to throw it at and now we find out that the FBI and the Sheriff's Department are at odds when the thing first started over jurisdiction. Come on.
I did not know that.
Yeah, well, so I got that last week from a deputy sheriff out with homicide, and he kind of talked his way around it and everything, but I knew then, so I didn't say anything on your show. And sure enough, they started talking about it yesterday, that there was some friction in the beginning, which slowed things down. But the first people that are cleared, now don't forget, homicide's got this. There's several different functions of homicide. This is not about 5 cops doing everything. Oh no. They got specialists out there, intel people. The first people that are cleared are people who has the most contact with her, and then they back from there.
But no one has been named as cleared yet, which I think is kind of interesting. Nobody has been named as cleared. They will not discuss polygraphs. Polygraphs would have been one of the first things they should have done with family members, and that's something that information is generally not released to the public. So they could have completed the polygraphs, and we just don't know the answers, or maybe they just didn't for whatever reason. I don't know. But that's usually step number one. Yep. Is you start working your way out. You give every family member a polygraph. You start clearing the family members. And in a lot of investigations, they'll say, okay, especially high profile investigations, they'll say, oh, the family has been cleared. not the family. The family's been cleared. They've taken polygraph tests. They all passed. They haven't said that in this case. And I really do think you have to read between the lines, and the lines say, what's between the lines say that somebody in the family has not been cleared, and they have not maybe passed a polygraph test. So they're just not going to talk about it at all. That's my speculation. It's only speculation.
Yeah. There was a big robbery in St. Louis, and the attorneys, the guy gets robbed. He's on vacation, right? And an attorney called me and said, Joe, I need to come in the office. I got a case we want you to handle. A guy got robbed, and we want you to find the money. And the first thing I said was, didn't he call the police? Yeah, he called the police, but look, coming in. So I get in the office, and the attorney says, you got to find the money or who did it before the police. I go, why? He says, because he just went through a divorce, and he had to give a statement on how much money he had, and he falsified that and to the IRS because he didn't lose $5,000 in the robbery. He lost $500,000, $500,000. I go, holy smoke!
That's wild.
Oh. So I had to find who robbed him, and you know how I did it? You know how I did it? Somebody who was in that house had to have working knowledge. And so it was a family member. Somebody had been in the house, been comfortable. You know how I knew that? I'm not trying to be gross, okay? Somebody pooped in the toilet in the master bedroom and didn't flush it.
Oh my goodness.
What does that tell you? One, somebody's comfortable, and he was in the master bedroom, and no jewelry was stolen, and had a lot of jewelry. They simply went after the cash. So I said, it's somebody in your family did this, and your brother, I happen to know, is a slob, and I bet it was your brother. You didn't flush the toilet. So I got to prove it, right? And of course, I interrogated his brother, his brother's girlfriend, all these people. Well, in those days, I had access to your credit report. I ran their credit report. 2 days after the robbery, the brother, girlfriend, paid off all her credit cards. Hello. I go to interview his best friend. Got a brand new motorcycle sitting in front of his house. This guy don't work. I said, what do you do for a living? Oh, I'm unemployed right now. I said, well, hell, the sticker's still on the motorcycle. Where'd you get that? Oh, I've been saving my money. 2 days after the robbery, the brother's best friend buys a motorcycle. Case closed.
Now, Colonel Adams, I don't mean to interrupt you, but we have breaking news.
Good.
Okay, now this is not Nancy related, but we were just talking about the airspace being closed in El Paso, Santa Fe, New Mexico. There was one other location, I'm not sure which one that was. Now we hear, this is breaking news, just came through. United States military shoots down Mexican cartel drones near El Paso after breaching U.S. airspace. So, we were kind of questioning, why was airspace closed to begin with? It happened very abruptly, as you know. No one was giving notification, not the airports, not the air traffic controllers, not the pilots. All of a sudden, it was announced that the airspace over and around the airport in El Paso, Santa Fe, I should say the entire area of El Paso, Santa Fe, New Mexico, and one other area. Carl, if you know that third area, I didn't know there was a third area, but somebody mentioned there was. Let us know.
Yeah, I think it was New Orleans.
Was it New Orleans? And so I was told early this morning, I was running late for the show today because I was contacting everyone I could think of who might know something. And I was told it had something to do with Cuba and that it was nothing really crazy that was going to happen, but there was maybe some security threats and they wanted to make sure they closed down those airspaces. I can't validate that. It may have nothing to do with that. But then I heard, as we were just getting ready to get started with the show, that the airspace in El Paso, that security threat was lifted and the airspace reopened. And then we just hear, again, this is breaking news that just came through, that the United States shot down cartel drones, Mexican cartel drones over El Paso. Now, these drones, of course, fly around all the time. We don't talk about them a lot, but we know it's a common occurrence. And apparently Mexico, the cartels didn't know that the airspace was closed. But what information do you have, or do you have information about what security situation it was, why these airspaces were closed to begin with, because it happened very quickly and without warning.
Yeah, the first clue, we were looking at from surface to airs to begin with. Then so what if you turn that around and it's from air to surface? So there's two possibilities. If we're going to use a SAM, then of course they had to come across the border. Then I said, what about drones? And somebody made a comment that they didn't close down the airspace for commercial flights. So we understand passengers 32,000, 33,000. They closed them at just under 18. We'll pad that by half of that. It all points to a drone. And that's where we left it. But now, here's another thing, too. People, unless you are up on military equipment, people still think that drones are those little things with propellers on them. No. These things are the size of a small airplane. Those are the real drones.
Oh yeah, I've seen some drones flying around that are absolutely, absolutely insane. Now, I didn't hear that it wasn't for, airliners already in flight, above a certain area. The actual announcement was the FAA has abruptly closed the airspace around El Paso for 10 days for special security reasons. All flights are grounded, including commercial, cargo, general aviation, and there's no exemption even for medevac. The airports and pilots were given little to no notice, and it's unclear exactly what's been planned. It said air traffic control recordings show how caught off guard both pilots and controllers were, that they had shut down the airspace. And I said Santa Fe, it was actually Santa Teresa, mistake on my end, and New Orleans. Now, I don't know if this has been lifted in Santa Teresa and in New Orleans or not. I heard that it was lifted in El Paso. Do you think they were specifically looking for the drones that they shot down?
I don't, it depends on their detection, but they only blocked the airspace from 0 to under 18,000. So that means the aircraft can't take off and the aircraft can't land. They didn't shut down the ionosphere.
Okay.
Because they whether they had some information or somebody talked or they spotted these things. So I was involved in a drone program on the border back in 2005, and they shut it down because the federal government said to the drone operators, and this was independent contractors, you could only fly a drone based on national security if it's in sight. So we were flying drones into Mexico long before they even thought about it. But they shut the operation down because of George Bush and put us out of business. But some of these drones, like Carl said, are the size of a small Cessna plane.
Right.
And that's what we were flying.
Oh, absolutely. Some of them are huge. On the order that I have, it doesn't state any specific, elevation. But here's what's interesting about this is it does state that if somebody violates this, these requirements of these three areas, that they are subjected to the use of deadly force by the United States government. So the United States government, whatever is taking place in Santa Teresa, New Mexico, El Paso, Texas, and New Orleans, Louisiana, is very serious. If the United States government is threatening to use deadly force, if you violate the airspace, that's something, I've never even heard of that happening. Unless, of course, the president's coming in or, something specific. But then, of course, they're told ahead of time. But I think it's really unusual that these three airports were closed. And of course, Cuba is kind of in that direct line across the Gulf of America. So, does it have anything to do with Cuba? I don't think it has anything to do with Mexico, quite honestly, because why would they shut it down in New Orleans if it was related to Mexico? I could see El Paso or even Santa Teresa, Mexico, right there, by the border, and El Paso, so close to the border.
Obviously, we had some advance warning, and we caught the cartel running drones back then, and they would run them up to the border, turn around and go back, up to the border, turn around and go back, but they never crossed the border. And then they started dropping drugs off with small drones inside the United States at different locations. So they've been playing that stuff a long time. Now, how they're able to track this back to the cartel, only the CIA would know that. So now you're getting into CIA territory. As far as I know, the CIA, coincidence, as far as I know, the CIA is not allowed to operate within these borders. I don't know where that rule went to. But when you open up international stuff, here comes the CIA, and they're nobody to screw with. Now,
No.
maybe Carl knows how I was able to trace that back, but I mean, there of course our satellites can read a license plate, you know, a mile up. So they're watching it. They're watching it. So, but obviously we had some advance notice because they shut down the airports.
Now, what I think, at least my opinion, is quite invaluable in this situation because I truly have no idea. Based on the couple of people that answered me back this morning, and I sent out a lot of messages. I haven't heard from anyone else yet. They all said Cuba, Cuba, Cuba. I don't know what this has to do with Cuba. Is it possible that these Mexican the cartels from Mexico were sending these drones over just like they normally do? They just weren't aware that the airspace was closed, so therefore we shot their drones down. Or were we looking for the drones? Maybe it had nothing to do with Cuba, but let's just say, for example, that it did have something to do with Cuba. What were we expecting? That maybe Cuba was going to launch something at us? What would cause us to shut these airspaces down that would be in relation to Cuba? That's really confusing to me.
Yeah, but but you figure the bad guys know that Trump's got his finger on the trigger. Don't screw with Donald Trump. Donald Trump would like for an incident to happen to give him an excuse. This plays into his plans. Not saying that the CIA didn't send the drone in to give us a reason to bomb the hell out of them. So it's a very complex world. Things are never as they seem. Remember, I told you things are never as they seem.
Correct. And Carl says, of course, the Mexican side of the border was not shut down, only the U.S. I really think this had something to do with Cuba, and those drones just have to be, they didn't realize the airspace was shut down, and they sent those drones through, and therefore we shot them down. But I don't know. Time will tell. Hopefully later today we'll find some new information. Now, Colonel Adams, this is going to be my last topic, and then I've got to run because I've got to get to work today. Netanyahu yesterday visited the White House. And the purpose this was a stated purpose. I'm not assuming anything, a stated purpose. He was there to talk to Donald Trump about potential airstrikes against Iran. And I thought that was odd. Netanyahu does not need to come to the White House to talk to Donald Trump about potential airstrikes against Iran. That was very strange, in my opinion. They've got a phone. They often use that telephone to talk. And they could have easily discussed this over a telephone or by messenger or however else they want to talk, how two presidents get together. But Netanyahu, though, did take that step. He did fly into the United States. He did arrive. He did go to the White House, and he did talk to Donald Trump. Now, we don't know what came from that. We do know that Iran has absolutely stated they will not shut down their nuclear program. They're not going to slow down their nuclear program. They're not going to agree to any of our demands. So what do you have any inkling, even if it's just speculation, why Netanyahu had to come to the White House to talk to Donald Trump about airstrikes?
That's just psyops. Instead of saying I've talked to Netanyahu over the phone, well, it's much more effective when Netanyahu and Trump walk into the White House together. It's sending a message of a real an obvious message to Iran. I mean, why would this guy, and they know that too, they don't have to ever meet, but the visual effect, showing unity, that's what it's about. It's a psyops. It's just part of it.
And that would make sense to me because I kept thinking about it. I posted about it. I'm like, I don't understand why this is happening. Why Netanyahu? And somebody commented, and I kind of related to their comment. Somebody commented to my post, and they're like, well, maybe he's going to sit in the Situation Room while it all goes down. And I thought, well, that could be kind of interesting. And I don't think Donald Trump trusts, even though, Donald Trump and Netanyahu clearly have a good relationship, but Donald Trump does not trust Netanyahu. And the reason why we know this is because the last time they had airstrikes in Iran, if you recall, Donald Trump made this big announcement. Donald Trump is a very proud man. He made an announcement that, hey, it's over. It's done. We're out of there. There will be no further airstrikes in Iran. Then all of a sudden, here comes Israel. Boom, boom, boom. Right down the line, conducting, in fact, some of the largest airstrikes that had taken place through that entire operation after Donald Trump said it was over. And Donald Trump was furious, absolutely furious. Him taking to social media just as fast as he can and, warning Netanyahu, do not do that. You don't do that to me. I said it was over and it's over. You don't go back. And I heard that he made some very, stern calls to Netanyahu saying, you don't make me look like a fool in the public. When I say it's over, it's over. And so at first I was thinking, well, maybe he's got Netanyahu there to keep control of him from, giving some commands after the fact, but nothing happened. We didn't have any airstrikes, and these airports being closed down had nothing to do with Iran, of course. But I thought that was kind of interesting.
Jay said that the hitting the end of Iran is imminent. Yeah, it's whatever they're doing, they're positioning the pieces on the chessboard, and we're going to hit them. I was surprised that Trump's talking about bringing in another flotilla of ships, which is kind of overkill unless they're going to be watching the back door. Yeah, we're going to get them. They know they're finished. So, and also this rebuilding or restructuring of their nuclear facility. Yeah, we're talking years to recover from those bombings. I mean,
Correct.
This is not something. Well, if you don't leave us alone, we're going to build a bomb next week. No, they're not. No, they're not.
It's not going to be next week. Not unless they've got some facilities we didn't detect, which I think would be nearly impossible that we would know. But I also agree with Jay that the end of the Iranian regime is imminent. But I think we're all been hesitating and wondering when it's going to happen. We've been ready for it to happen for quite some time. All of those lives lost in Iran, and we don't want that to be in vain. These people fighting very hard, for their freedom, and I think we owe it to them to give them that freedom, even though I always take the stance that we need to stop being the world's police, that we should not get involved, that we absolutely should not go into another country and replace their leadership. But in this case, and in Venezuela, I feel this way. Cuba, I feel this way. I feel the same way in Ukraine. I feel the same way for Iran, is that the leadership in these countries does need to be replaced because of what they're doing to the people.
Yeah, we're not being the world police. We're actually being the police for the United States. If we don't resolve these issues with and poor people in Cuba, I've been down there more than once, and I think Jay's comment was, "Oh yeah, the drones flying from Cuba will be made from junk 55 Chevy parts." That's not too far off the truth because I've been there. Yeah, I've seen these guys make piston rings out of a beer can and keep the car running. Not a lot of compression, but they work. No, these things with Venezuela and Iran and Cuba, these have to be addressed. Now's the time because we got a commander in chief who ain't screwing around. They'll use our military appropriately, not waste it. But these things have to be done, and you've got to get rid of Iran. If you got to cut the head off the snake, in Iran's.
We absolutely do. I can't wait for it happen. And speaking of cutting the head off the snake, one last thing I almost forgot is that I'm hearing that we are going to be withdrawing ICE from Minneapolis after all, but not for the reasons some people might think. It is because finally it appears that Walz has been cooperating and that he has allowed Minneapolis police officers to actually do their job, which of course they've wanted to do from day one, and that is go out and arrest the violent protesters throughout Minneapolis. And we're finally seeing that when they're out there pelting federal buildings, pelting federal agents, following them around, they're making arrests. Finally happening.
I think that's part of Walz's plea bargain because he knows he's going down. Hey, so I forgot about this. So I was checking my Facebook page for you to see where you're at on today's show. Once I agreed, told Deanna to get a hold of you, and I would do it. I'm only doing today's show to help you out because there's so much crap going on even overnight.
I'm always happy to have you, especially on a day like today when I have a sore throat and can't talk.
You sound pretty good. Did Omar get arrested?
Not that I've heard, but you know what? Not that I've heard, but I haven't been paying much attention to her, so I don't know. But I'm not. She should be arrested.
She was arrested.
You think so?
For $30 million corruption case in California and Minnesota. I mean, I don't have I can't use my phone because I keep it away from when we do this show because it might interfere. But hey, can anybody look that up? On Facebook this morning was a big article that she had been arrested, and it even showed her without her towel head.
I did not. I No, I did not hear. I just realized too. I had a message up there that I didn't hide. No, I did not hear that.
It was,
You know, and I
it
scan
was
the
like,
news every morning, and I'm on
it was,
top of it all day. But that is one thing that
it,
slipped by me.
it was 2 reels down from yours. And I saw it just as I walked into the house to come into the office.
Was it a legitimate source?
I'm asking. I'm asking. It didn't say, they said the feds got her. So I don't know.
I don't know. I know there's a lot of false news out there. You know what? I just don't know. And Carl, I know Carl said I have an echo. I don't know if anybody else can hear me echoing. I know I had that problem on Monday. I don't know why that's happening. My setup is the same as it's always set up. So I will work on that.
It's audible, but there is an echo.
Really? That is so strange.
I thought it was like, because I didn't have my hearing aid in, so I didn't.
Oh, no, but I'm sure that's painful to listen to. Well, yeah. Colonel Adams, I'm going to take a look on, see what happened to Ilhan Omar, but I have not heard about an arrest.
I should have took a screenshot, damn it.
Yeah, I'll look for it. Trust me, I'm a good researcher. I'll find it. And,
I know.
So I'll bring it up tomorrow.
That's big news.
Yeah, it would absolutely be.
I didn't see it on the news. So I think it's a fake, but hopefully it's real.
Yeah, there's a lot. You got to be very careful. Not you, but people in general have to be very careful on social media because there's a lot of fake news stories out there. There's a lot of sites that look like they would be like news sites, and then really it's like clickbait. You click on it to see, oh, Omar was arrested, and then you get on there and it's like something, oh, well, she needs to be arrested. Just something completely different. And I'm not saying that's what this was, but those things are out there sometimes.
It's probably fake because nobody knows about it. I just happened to see it. I was just checking your Facebook to make sure we were on for today, and there it popped up.
Yeah, no, I had not heard about it, but I'm going to look it up. We'll get to the bottom of it, and then I'll update everybody tomorrow if it is or is not the case. But I'm glad to have you. Thank you for joining me. I hate that I have an echo, but I will be working on my sound system to try to figure that out. And Colonel Adams, do you have any last thoughts before we head out for the day?
We covered a lot of territory, a lot of good. We're having a conversation, okay, and we had a good conversation. Hey, what happened to your trolls?
They haven't only one today, from what I can see. Now, when you and I are talking, I don't see all the comments because I'm focusing on you. So if somebody else was there, I'm not aware of them.
I asked Deanna. I said I haven't. The trolls lasted for about 2 days, and they took off. I guess they moved on to somebody else.
Now, Charles says he just shared the Omar story with me. I thank you for that. Is it true? I mean, I've been looking at news popping up. I haven't seen anything. So we will take a look at that, Colonel Adams, and we'll get it figured out. But, maybe it is true. Maybe it just slipped by me. I've been pretty busy, but I haven't seen it.
One day, just over in one day, that's 3. Went from a security alert on the border, the Guthrie break, and I hope she gets locked. I mean, she's supposedly locked up. We'll see. Yeah, somebody let me know.
I hope so. I do hope so.
Hey, Tab, thanks for having me. If not, well, if this continues, I'll jump in with you again before the end of the week. Here we're at Hump Day, so.
Well, we have plenty to talk about, don't we?
Oh my God, this is great. This is great. You might say, okay. All right, thanks, guys.
All right, guys, thank you, Colonel Joe Adams.
Get the Washington Guard's newsletter, patriotsofthewashingtonguard.com. Join in the conversation. Keep up to date on what we're doing because we're busy. Thank you, Allison. Talk to you later, sweetheart. Carl, thank you. Bye, guys.
Bye, Colonel Adams. Thank you so much for joining us. That's Colonel Joe Adams of the Washington Guard Militia, located right here in Franklin County, Missouri. Thank you so much, Colonel Joe Adams, for joining us. It's lovely to have him on so we can bounce off some ideas on Colonel Adams and get his expertise. He's probably one of the only folks, around these days who have worked, or one of the few that have literally worked on a true kidnapping for ransom. So it was kind of interesting to get his opinion on those things. So we'll keep up to date on these. You can reach out to Colonel Joe Adams on the Washington Guard at the Washington Guard, or I'm sorry, Patriots, if I can get it right, Patriots at thewashingtonguard.com. So Patriots at thewashingtonguard.com. Sign up for his newsletter. He'd be happy to school anybody and how to set up your own security system. They've got some self-defense classes for women. Lots of great things going on their musters on Saturdays. So check them out, particularly if you're in the Missouri area. You know, you can't just show up. Don't show up at the complex there. Make sure you get a hold of Colonel Adams ahead of time. Don't show up. It's kind of like going into Area 51. You don't want to just show up at the property line. All right, guys, that's it for me today. I am Tabitha Hassell with Tabs on Tap. I will look forward to seeing you all tomorrow. I still have some voice left. I feel a little bit better than I did yesterday. Man, I had a rough day, but we'll see what happens tomorrow morning. Hopefully you guys have a great day. Enjoy this beautiful weather while we can before we get a little bit more snow. Have a great day. I'm Tabitha again, Hassell with Tabs on Tap.